Welcome to Hope for Our Times, and back with our guest, my guest today, James Cadiz. James, great having you here. Hey, before we get going, I want to remind all of you, listen, please listen, like this channel, subscribe to this channel. It's absolutely free to subscribe to this channel, and also share this with your friends. Listen, you're going to be blessed today, and both James and I, we want you to share this with as many people as possible. We live in times, listen, we have a lot of distractions that are out there right now with the coronavirus. I look at that as being a smoke screen in one sense. It's real. We're dealing with it. We talked about that just the other day. Right now, here it is Friday, and we're going to deal with some of the other things that we are not hearing about in any of the news that have incredible prophetic implications. So let's get going. Again, don't forget to like. Don't forget to subscribe. It's free. And don't forget to share. James, so much to talk about. It's wild how many things are missed because of coronavirus, isn't it?
It's incredible. It's interesting. This is one of the implications of the effects of the coronavirus. The media is brilliantly using the overwhelming gloom and fear of the coronavirus to allow other items to just slip under. And it's kind of unique, especially some of the things with the current elections that are coming up, many of the things going on with world news, many of the smart moves that the Trump administration is making, and there's just a lot happening. There's a lot happening, especially on the world level.
There's a lot of moves. So we have our elections coming up, and it's going to be fascinating. Just being alive right now is really amazing, but and watching it. But the elections in Israel, they just happened. All right. So Israel hasn't been able to form their government, but now they have. They're looking at it for the reasons, obviously, with coronavirus. Now Netanyahu has what he needs. And it looks like, James, it looks like Israel is going to be annexing parts of Judea and Samaria. And if this is true, this is to me is really remarkable, especially as we look in the Bible at the land that God gave Israel. And we know where this is going to go in the last days. And to see this happening right now with what took place in Israel, and the world doesn't even know what's happening, which is kind of cool in a way.
It is, and it's really interesting when you look at the mechanism of annexation to already establish what exists in not only their eyes but in God's eyes. It's really interesting, and I think what's more interesting is the fact that our Secretary of State, in essence, is taking the stand where he is basically saying their business is their business and they can pretty much do whatever they want. They're a sovereign nation. I think, I'm sorry, it's overwhelming to think about that. And, it's funny that you mentioned the new government being formed. They finally have the new government being formed. Here's a parallel I don't think I've actually discussed with you before, but think about this. The major elections that have taken place over the last few years with some of the most significant world leaders are a direct repudiation to the liberal I hate using the word liberal because liberal is not a good word to use, to the extreme leftist and angry to God population in this world. Now think about this for a minute, right? President Trump's in office, right? Mm-hmm. Now, granted, people have their own issues with his personality, with the way he carries himself, with some of the things he's done in the past. It doesn't matter. What matters is what he's doing now. And he's doing a lot of good things. But think this through for a minute. You've got him, you've got Boris Johnson, which Boris Johnson, no doubt, you want to talk about a direct repudiation to the attempts of people on the left to completely destroy the will of the people in the UK. It's incredible. And then you take Bibi Netanyahu, and you put all of them together, and there's this extraordinarily amazing parallel that happens between all of them. Now, I knew for a fact that Bibi was going to get the government that he wanted. I mean, come on, give me a break. They hate him so much that they're doing many of the same things that they've been doing here in the United States to Trump. They're doing the same things to him, and they were doing the same thing to Boris Johnson, but people are sick of it, and truth is prevailing, and it's unique because I'm actually hearing a rumor, and I don't know how true this is, but I do think it's likely only because I know what the Bible says, that nations like Saudi Arabia are beginning to take the same stand as maybe our own Secretary of State would regarding the mechanism of annexation that's being utilized. I mean, that's crazy, because if that's really the case, then we go back to Ezekiel 38 and we look at Saudi Arabia being one of the nations that's going to be upset with the attack from the north towards Israel. They're going to protest it.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about that for a minute.
Yeah, I find this really remarkable to be witnessing these things. You know, I've said this many times. There's over 800 signs regarding the second coming of Christ, starting with Israel being a nation again, so many of the things surrounding Israel. And then you go into the things that a lot of people are talking about right now, the mark of the beast and all that. But 800 signs. And one of those signs is exactly what you just said, with Saudi Arabia is going to be protesting this invasion that's going to happen by Russia, which I want to ask you about in a minute too, because there's a lot of things that are going on with Iran. In fact, I think it was just the other day that Trump said, hey, if Iran does anything hostile to the U.S. ships, he's authorized the U.S. Navy to take out whatever hostility.
Yes.
That is, and you know, here's the thing they know with Trump. Everybody's learned with Trump. If he says something, he is going to do it. Unlike Obama, if you cross this line, you'll be in trouble. Well, let me redraw the line. If you cross this line, you'll be, well, wait a minute, let me draw the line again. Trump doesn't do that. It's if he says it, he will follow through.
And then think about this, Tom. If you go back to the day after he put that tweet out, that was yesterday. He put out the tweet the day before, no, 2 days. It was 2 days before today. And then it was 3 days. And then 2 days ago at that press conference, President Trump got asked. This was the question that they asked him. They said, well, are you changing the ROEs now for the military, the rules of engagement? And the president just looked at him and says, we're all good. We're covered. There's nothing to worry about here, basically. So in other words, mind your own business. I'm not telling you what our military operations are, and I'm justified in telling them to do exactly what they're going to do. This is well within the confines of the scope of the rules of engagement that have been set forth by the international world. So he's just willing to say, I'm going for it. Don't worry about it. And I can, like you said, I promise you, he is going to blow those things the honk up. I'm telling you that right now. It's going to be crazy. But anyway, it's unique to think about that. And there's a lot of implications to that too, by the way.
Oh yeah. Well, let me ask you about this, since you bring this up with whole issue with Trump saying I've authorized him basically to do whatever's necessary. So for years, in fact, I think I can go back in my mind to the 1960s when I was a kid. Vietnam was going on. It seemed like even back then, whoever wanted to call some kind of strike, they had to call Washington and get approval. And it was just broadcasting. You're telling the enemy, hey, this is what we're going to do. Well, Trump says, well, wait a minute, this isn't how you fight a war. Who else fights that way? Only the Western world would fight that way. You know, do you think Putin's going to call up and say, hey, I'm going to launch a surprise attack against Israel?
Yeah.
I just want everybody to be alerted. Who's going to fight like that? You know, the whole thing is absurd. And then we have Congress. You got Pelosi, and you got AOC, and you got these people down in your district that would love to tell Iran, hey, in 24 hours, this is what we're going to do. So make sure you guys are ready. The whole thing is absurd. And so I really like this tactic that's being taken here also, that, look, we need to do what is right. Here's something else I see that's bothersome. Why is it that so many in Washington are so pro-Iran? We saw this in the days of Obama. We're still seeing it now. And the only thing, that, James, that I can make sense of it is spiritual in nature. I can make sense of it with the Bible because of the way the Bible says everything is going to go in the last days. The Messiah is going to return to Israel. I get it spiritually, how the enemy of our souls does not want to see Israel exist. But can you think of any logical reason? What's the reason for the left?
Yeah, well, the main reason, like you said, is it's demonic, right? It's a demonically inspired thing. But there's several things that we have to look at. You know, there's a lot of trees. When you do the analysis to why so many people, so many political operatives are seemingly on the side of Iran, it relates to a lot of things, okay? Perhaps one of the most significant contributors to this machine that continues to run in support of Iran centers around the fact that the president has taken a clear stand against their operations. He's identified them as evil, and so just because of that, people are embracing Iran. That's number one, right? Which, by the way, the president is brilliant in how he's handling it, because recently someone in the media tried, actually on multiple occasions, they've tried to entrap him, the fake lying news, and basically by asking him, well, they're starving in Iran. Is there anything we can do to help them? Will you help them? Sure, I'll help them eat. Of course I will. Good response on the president's part, right? But I think that's probably the primary thing that's driving this. I think secondarily to it is it really doesn't relate to Iran as much as it relates to the anti-Semitic bent that is growing in this country. And we all know that the base of that is satanically inspired. So people are naturally going to support anybody who hates Israel, okay? So you think about these evil women, these four horrible excuses for leaders that exist within Congress. I'm not even going to name them because they don't deserve to be named, who are continuing to be at the spearhead of this anti-Semitic bent, the investment in BDS that's taking place. They're going beyond BDS right now. BDS is nothing. BDS was the sort of the little tiny little poke before the massive blade comes across. Think about this. There are 18 members of the House who are openly and unapologetically anti-Semitic. So you think about that. And probably I would venture to say that a large majority of those who are members of the Democratic Party also stand in that vein, but won't openly say it. And the reason why I say that is because when openly anti-Semitic remarks have been made by members of the House, nobody chose to censor that. Nobody chose to address it. Nobody chose to deal with it. So if I'm standing in front of a nation that one of their stated objectives as their existence as a nation is to destroy the existence of the Jewish state, you better expect that they're going to be embraced by these people who continue to carry that deep-rooted hate for Israel. So I think a majority of the embracing that's going on right now with Iran centers around that. I think that's where a majority of that happens. Not to mention the fact that there's lots of lies that go with that, right? So these people who are propagating their hatred for the Jews are also propagating things that are not true. They're talking about the power problem that's in Iran. There is no power problem. They're talking about, lots of other things that necessitate the use of nuclear technology. And so we should be allowing them to utilize nuclear technology for those things. My goodness, everybody knows that Iran's launch of the satellite a few days ago was an open, blatant, we got you. This is a military operation. They're even saying it's a military operation. Yet a majority of these same people who are sympathizers with that evil access nation, right, continue to say, oh, this is for the necessity of telecommunications and broadband because they're so hit hard by COVID, they need to have the internet so that they can walk and move in freedom. Really?
Yeah,
really?
These are lies. These are lies. You hear these things, and remember when that terrorist leader was taken out. I think it was January, wasn't it? Or was it December?
Yeah, no, it would have been. I think January.
So he was removed, and how up in arms the left was over that whole thing.
Oh.
You look at, so here we are. Here's what's very troubling to me. A lot of these people in America right now that are anti-Semitic are Jewish.
Oh, Chuck Schumer. He should be ashamed of himself.
Chuck Schumer. Yeah, Chuck Schumer. And you start looking at so many people in Washington that are Jewish and yet anti-Israel and even anti-Semitic. You think this makes no sense. So you're trying to wrap your mind around it logically as impossible. Biblically, we can see it. We know that the world's going to be against Israel. We know anti-Semitism is only going to increase in the last days. So when we look at this, so let's get into Ezekiel 38 for just a minute. We've been
Okay.
talking about Israel. They're getting ready to annex more land. I think that is absolutely remarkable. That's just going to get the goat of more people who don't like Israel. But listen, God is with Israel, and Israel's going to move forward, and Israel's going to exist through the tribulation. And when Jesus returns, Israel is still going to exist, and so are the Jewish people. And you look and you go, well, not all the Jewish people, but nevertheless, we know how that's going to be. They're not going to be eliminated, and God has a covenant with them. And it's even hard for, but
Oh, I said that's right.
yeah, it's hard for church people to wrap their mind around, for whatever reason, that God made a covenant with Israel, covenant with Abraham, made a covenant with David, and you look, you go, this is the reality of it. And there is a war that's going to come against Israel, and God promises, I'm going to protect you. Ezekiel chapter 38, a few different things going on. Iran launching their missile. We have what President Trump said just the other day. But when the war comes against Israel, the United States is not going to be taking the position they are right now, are they?
No, what I'm inclined to think is I'm inclined to think that the United States is going to be inconsequential for one of two reasons, right? The United States will be inconsequential because it just degrades, and this coronavirus could very, very well be a propulsion mechanism that causes that degradation to take place spiritually in the nation, right? Or it could be what I hope to be the case, and that is this coronavirus becomes a propulsion mechanism to basically settle in a spiritual awakening and a real sensitive heart for Christ. Imagine that when the rapture takes place, literally almost all of the population of the United States is gone. Then, bam, we see Ezekiel 38 happen, and I mean, think about that for a second. The lack of involvement in the United States is a very, very feasible thing. Here's another feasible scenario. And this is one, of course, that's also understandable. Trump is very nationalistic. That's not a bad word, by the way. He's an anti-globalist, right? So it could also be that something like this happens, and let's just assume nothing really changes, and everything as is in this country, and the country sort of remains a power, but not, it's not all that significant anymore because of the years of degradation, because of the leftist policies, the socialistic policies, communistic policies that are beginning to be put in place, all of these things that are going on with drones chasing people down, trackers. Governor Newsom yesterday announced this whole thing of we're going to deploy 12,500 trackers. What in the world does that mean, right? But that could happen, and as a result of that happening, all hell can break loose in Israel, coming from all these surrounding nations. And the United States will go, nope, don't want anything really to do with that. And that's also a distinct possibility. I mean, there's just a lot of things that we just don't know here.
Yeah, it's a huge possibility. The other possibility is Trump's not reelected.
Well, yeah, that scares me. I don't even want to think about that.
Yeah, well, when that happens, Israel's going to be cut off. Israel is going to be the not just forgotten stepchild. They're just going to be completely eliminated from favor with American policy.
At that point, too, the United States will really become inconsequential. Look, I don't think that it's any strange fact to us, those of us that study the Bible and know the Bible, that the reason why the United States has been so remarkably blessed since the beginning of the tenure of the existence of the President of the United States in his office has been because of his stance towards Israel. I think the economic blessing we've seen is as a result of that, the military, all the things that have grown and gotten really good. I mean, the very fact that we go through the world's most significantly horrible instance. We've never seen anything like this before, and yet our economy is still, if you were to use the Dow Jones Industrial as a marker, our economy is still 3,500 points above where it was when Obama left office.
Yeah.
That is not a direct statement about how bad one president is over another. I think it's more of a statement of the fact that God is blessing the United States of America because of the United States of America's stance with respect to Israel.
Yeah. So I was thinking about these things. So during the impeachment, Trump was still moving forward with things. He didn't let that stop him. So I'm looking at the coronavirus right now. He still moves forward with things. I'm thinking most people, presidents definitely, would be distracted by the impeachment, distracted by the coronavirus, he's accused by everything on MSNBC of it's his fault there's COVID-19. But in this, he goes against Iran. He says, look, we're going to blow you out of the water if you do anything to us. And then we also have this, and this is regarding electromagnetic pulse. Trump, during the COVID-19, is actually thinking about the possibility of an EMP attack. This is what this says. Maybe you can comment on it in a second and tell people what an EMP attack is. So Trump moves to protect America from electromagnetic pulse attack. The White House, here it is taking this potential threat seriously. On March 26th, so this goes back 2 weeks. We haven't heard anything, 3 weeks. He issued an executive order on coordinating national resilience to electromagnetic pulses in an effort to assess the risk of such an attack to critical U.S. infrastructure, and it went on to describe the problem. So here it is in the middle of all this. He's dealing with that. He's dealing with Iran, but an electromagnetic pulse has been a concern of a lot of people who've studied Bible prophecy for years. I remember talking about this at least 10 years ago. Yeah. And so for our viewers, what is an EMP attack?
Okay. Well, first of all, yeah, it's a much bigger deal now than it was 10 years ago, just because of the change in technology throughout the years. So many of you have heard it as electromagnetic pulse. It's oftentimes referred to as transient electromagnetic disturbance. And this can be created in two ways. It can be created naturally. When we say naturally, something that is not man-made. It can also be created by a series of pulses that are produced by or a weapon that's designed to create a magnetic field that creates disturbances. Now, what kind of disturbances does it create? Okay, well, basically it creates a field that is so strong, and we're delving into physics here, and I'm going to oversimplify everything that I'm saying, but it creates a field that is so strong that in essence, it damages anything that has any semblance of electronic mechanisms deployed, okay? So every chip, it could just go dead. So you wouldn't be able to turn on your computer. You wouldn't be able to watch TV anymore. You wouldn't be able to make a cell phone call. Anything that involves anything electronics. In most cases, with the new refrigeration systems that we have, including air conditioning, including refrigerators, and even many coffee makers, you would not be able to use it. So basically, 95% of the things that we rely upon in this country to get us from A to B would all die. The first type of vehicles that would die would be these Tesla vehicles, which, by the way, there's a huge discussion amongst the engineers at Tesla on how to pretty much make their vehicles EMP proof, which if they can do that, unbelievable, it's cool. There's some cool technology that actually knows how to deal with those magnetic fields. The problem is how do you deal with the transient electromagnetic disturbance that takes place when certain mechanisms are deployed? That's some of the things that they're still trying to learn how to figure out. But what ends up happening with all of this is literally your cars will stop working because your cars have computers in them. There's timing mechanisms that are deployed, and even something as simple as a mobility scooter. That's all gone. Everything is done. So you basically are literally going back to the caveman days. There is nothing else. The street lights don't work. Airplanes that are in the air, if they're susceptible to this, and they can be based on some of these new EMP weapons that are going on, they can literally dump the airplane. There's a technology that they're looking at right now that they've actually deployed in airplanes that are of significant value, like let's say Air Force One or that type of thing, where they seek to make it proof of EMP proof. But the problem is if that transient disturbance is so large by a natural occurrence or something like that, that airplane has no hope. Doesn't matter where the source is coming from. The magnetic field that can be created by something as simple as a meteorite shower that's so big that it actually creates all kinds of problems upon it making contact with the earth. Like some of the judgments that we read about in Revelation. Many of the judgments that we read about in the book of Revelation could easily create an EMP condition. So this is why the president is obviously very concerned, because truth be told, to make a machine that could create a magnetic field that could literally destroy everything within, let's just say 100 feet of it is not much. You could probably do that in a little motor vehicle. I mean, it's so the president, of course, is naturally, I'm assuming the president is naturally concerned about this because obviously there's a lot to be worried about. There's a lot to be worried about. Many of the national security things, all of it, missiles and everything that we have, it all depends on that type of thing.
Do you ever recall a president considering something like this in the past?
If there was, they weren't talking about it. Let's just put it that way. And I think that by the time a president actually talks about it, I'm almost willing to bet that he already has a significant amount of solutions in place.
Yeah, I'm thinking so too. He's been well informed enough to know, hey, this could be a problem. Here's something else to think about, and this is regarding famine. So there's different issues going on with famine. This article says the UN is now admitting that this coronavirus pandemic could spark famines of biblical proportions. I have this other article that talks about the famine issues, and it has, let me see, I'll find it here in just a second. The locust threats in Africa to bring about, and we've been reading about the locust threats in Africa, wiping out farms, entire farms in like 1 minute, where billions of locusts descend on these farms. We haven't experienced anything like that in California that I know of. Maybe there has been some time in the past before I was born or something like that. But we hear about these things in these foreign countries, but then we look at that with Africa. We look at the locust invasion. We look at the UN concerns. We also hear that I think there's something like, gosh, what is it? It's 54 countries. Let me see. 54 nations in Africa have imposed lockdowns, and they're looking at their economies collapsing. So we look at the entire continent of Africa, and you look at the population there, which already has severe problems anyways, and to catapult it with all the current things that are happening right now. It's mind-boggling. However, Revelation chapter 6 warns us that in the tribulation that's coming, this is where it's going to go. And things are going to be far worse in the future than what they are right now.
Yeah. Listen, words matter, okay? And I'm a big proponent of that statement, right? And I think one of the biggest problems with guys that sort of have gotten lost in the teaching of prophecy from back in the day versus the way we're teaching prophecy today is they're not being good watchmen, right? We're not paying attention to things. We're not taking these Bible verses and treating them as though they're current and important today. And so when we don't pay attention to certain words, we allow ourselves to be taken off guard. Jesus warned us of that, right? Paul even would say, I would have you, brother, not to be ignorant concerning these things. So in saying that, with that thought, I would encourage you to pay attention to the subtleties of the words that have been used by the President of the United States with respect to our food supply recently. Did you notice when they ask him, they constantly ask him about the food supply. Are you worried about the food chain? Are you worried about the food chain? The response of the president is literally the same every time. He says the food chain is secure. Okay, that's a military term. That is not a term associated with, oh, don't worry, there's going to be plenty of food and there's lots of food. There's lots of farmers making lots of food. Now, he says that, but his initial response is the food chain is secure, right? I mean, you think not the food chain, not the exact word, but anyway, he refers to it as being secure because it truly is a military operation in his mind. And famine, people don't get this. Famine can happen overnight. This is not something that just takes place where it gradually, we're seeing it get worse and worse and worse. No, it literally is something that can take place overnight if we're not careful and we're not watching things. And it's a literal daisy chain. It really is. Oil has something to do with it. Our truckers, all of our transporters. I mean, there's so many variables that exist that are right here. So it's unique. It's a very interesting issue. And it's interesting, I have a friend that goes to our church here. He's from Nigeria. And he was telling one of our men's groups in tears how bad things are over there. Literally, it's like food ended in that country. There's no more food anymore.
This is, talking about all these things, James, unfortunately, we're out of time. But you look at that. Look, you're going to be joining me Sunday night.
Yep, looking forward to it.
We're going to be live 4 o'clock Pacific time. on Hope for Our Times on the YouTube channel. Listen, again, for everybody who's out there, be sure you subscribe to this, share this with your friends, like it. We have a lot more. James and I are going to start doing this. Every Tuesday, we're going to have a post like this. We're going to be doing our podcast, and we're going to pick up from here with the problems going on that are affecting the world. This hunger problem in Africa. There are so many things, over 800 signs regarding the second coming of Christ. But we're taking the events of today, and we're going to connect these dots. James, any final word you have for everybody who's viewing?
Yeah, so let me just say this. I am going to reserve a lot of the commenting that I make regarding a lot of the issues that me and Tom are talking about to the times that me and Tom are together. Of course, I'm always going to talk about prophecy. I'm never going to shut my mouth about it. But I'm also providing, and it's my hope and my desire to continue to provide more practical encouragement to you, to making you aware of these things. And so I really do want to encourage you to subscribe to Hope for Our Times. Go to the YouTube channel. Tell people about Hope for Our Times. I think it's important. I would also encourage you to subscribe to our channel at calvarychapelsignalhill.com, only because I'm keeping you up to speed with the daily updates that I'm doing. Or you can go to my Instagram, which is just simply James Cadiz. And we're keeping you up to speed. But I can't encourage you enough, if you haven't done it, to subscribe. Because when you're subscribing to hopeforourtimes.com, you're also getting updates when they come out. And I think it's really important. And it also supports, it really does help to support the ministry that Tom is doing here. And I think it's important. And like I said, if you want some real-time updates, like right away as they happen, you can go to my Instagram, James Cadiz. But Hope for Our Times is doing that as well. And I don't know, Tom, you have a pretty good Instagram that you've got up, right? Are you updating?
We got Instagram and Facebook also.
Okay,
and,
so look up Tom.
Both of them. You're doing yours every day. I do got mine 3 times a week, 4 times a week. So with that, we are out of time. James, I miss you, but I'm going to see you in just a couple of days.
I can't wait. And I'm not going to be social distancing.
Yeah, and everybody tell your friends, Sunday night, 4 o'clock Pacific time, it will be live. God bless you all. Thank you, James.
All right.